Welcome back, my friend. Today, I want to tell you a story that goes way back to 1912. You see, there was this man called Akufo-Addo who became the king for the Abuakwa people. When he became king, he changed his name from Akufo-Addo to Nana Ofori-Atta the First. Now, this king was indeed a very powerful man, telling you, not because he had any kind of supernatural powers like Agokoli and Okonfanochi and the rest, but because this man is the root of all of Ghana's problems. I'm telling you, he married 44 wives. And guess what? He had more than 100 children. Believe it or not, the family that he built became the silent controllers of this country for the next 100 years, which includes today. Let's take some time to talk about some of his children so that you understand the kind of power that this man's family has. One of his sons, William Ofori-Atta, was the one who helped start the UGCC, and he also became one of the Big Six. Even though the colonial masters arrested him in 1948, he later became Ghana's Minister for Foreign Affairs. Then there was another man called J.B. Dankwa. Now, this J.B. Dankwa was Akufo-Addo's half-brother, okay? He was also part of the Big Six. In fact, he was the one who suggested that our country should be called Ghana after we gained our independence. Now, Akufo-Addo also had a daughter named Adeline. This woman, she married Edward Akufo-Addo, who was also one of the Big Six, and the two of them later gave birth to our one and only Nanae, mama, Adodisi. So you see, like, this family actually, like, it is just filled with big men all over the place. And all these people are people who have been in government for a very long time, right? We are not done. Another one of Akufo-Addo's sons, he's called Dr. Jones Ofori-Atta. Now, this man was an economist, okay? He worked as a deputy minister for finance under Prime Minister Buzia. This Dr. Jones gave birth to a son, and he decided to name him Kenneth. This Kenneth boy is our main character for today, because he will grow up to become the almighty Ken Ofori-Atta. But let's spend a little time getting to know how Ken Ofori-Atta grew up. Okay, he started his basic education in Accra, Newtown. After he finished his primary school, he went to Achimota Secondary School. While he was there, he met one guy named Kelly Gachekpo, who was his classmate. All right. Please keep this guy's name in mind because we will talk about him again very soon. After he finished secondary school, Ken decided to work for some time as a maths teacher at Accra Academy. Then in August 1980, he japa. The guy left Ghana and he traveled all the way to Columbia University in New York to study economics. He spent 4 years there, and then he went to Wall Street after he graduated. He got a job as an analyst at Morgan Stanley, and that was where Ken learned how these big companies deal with money and trading. And later, he left Morgan Stanley to go get his master's degree at the Yale School of Management. While he was there, he met another guy named James Akpo. This guy will also come into the picture later on, so keep him in mind. They both graduated in 1988, and after that, Ken went back to Wall Street to work for Salomon Brothers as an investment banker. He was helping companies to get investments and all of that. So while he was busy making all these achievements, he suddenly realized that I haven't been to Ghana. It's a whole 10 years and I haven't stepped my foot in Ghana. So around late 1980s, he decided that it was finally time to go back home and see what was happening in his country. When he landed, he saw that our economy was struggling. The IMF and the World Bank had put in place some very strict economic policies, so things were not going well for Ghana at all. And on top of that, there was no proper bank in the country that could help these businesses find investments to grow. That was exactly what he went to learn outside of the country. So Ken had this feeling to help, especially knowing that Ghana has always been in the hands of his family. So what did he do? He flew back to New York, walked straight into his office at Salomon Brothers, and the guy just resigned. He says it is enough. He packed his things, he left Wall Street, and even though he didn't know exactly what business he was going to do next in Ghana, he just moved back to Accra, and then he linked up with his classmates Kelly Gajakpo and James Akpo, these two guys. In October of 1990, the three of them managed to gather $25,000 from their own savings, and some small loans that they took around. Then they went to Cantamanto. They rented just one small apartment over there. Right there in the middle of that market, they started Databank Financial Services. And that, my friends, became the very first investment bank in the whole of Ghana. Just the next month, the Ghana Stock Exchange officially opened and Databank started working on the stock. But there was one small challenge be like that. Like the new stock market didn't have a way to track how the company shares were performing. Okay, so Ken and his team had to sit down every single day and calculate the share prices and the total value of the companies by hand. And that was a lot of work. And after they did that, they used these numbers to create their own Databank stock index and something they called Databank stock average. Okay? So people could easily see how the market was performing. Then a few years later, in 1994, the government decided to sell off shares it holds in 7 big companies, including some major banks and factories. It was that the government was really struggling, so they wanted to sell off their shares and they didn't know how to go about it. So Databank stepped in to manage the whole process for them. Ken, using all his old connections from Wall Street, all the big guys over there, he was the main person who convinced international investors to buy these shares. The deal went through. The government was happy. They successfully brought foreign money into our new stock market and everything was going so smoothly. Everybody was happy. But after all that hard work, the government refused to pay Databank their fees. The political party that was in power knew that Ken's family supported the opposition, so they openly claimed that Databank didn't have the right political color to get the government's money. Can you imagine? That's exactly the words that they use. The right political color to scam Databank. I mean, this thing started long ago. Not today. This government scamming people. Chiakai. So instead of fighting the government for that money, Ken and his partners just said, look, you know what? Let's forget it. They even swore right there and then that they would never and ever work for the government again. But they would rather focus on helping these ordinary people like you and me who don't have shindang to build wealth. So they started a special investment program called the EPAC Pan-African Mutual Fund. This fund made it possible for the average Ghanaian to invest their money for profit, even if it was just 1 CD, 2 CDs, whatever it is. And my brother, my sister, this idea was perfect. It just blew up Databank at once. Everybody was talking about Databank. The market women, everybody, Databank abo. So for many years, Databank grew to become a massive financial company. They were handling huge deals for big businesses and managing over $500 million in assets at the time. Ken Ofori-Atta himself was the head of Databank for a very long time, like from 1990 when they started till February 14, 2012. On that Valentine's Day, he decided to retire from Databank. Okay, but even after stepping down, he didn't cut his business ties. He still sat on the board of one company called the Enterprise Group, which was it was another huge company like that dealt with insurance, properties, medicine, and even banking. Ken's hard work got him a lot of respect, honestly. Inside of Ghana, outside of Ghana, everywhere, everybody was talking about Ken Ofori-Atta. Even Yale University made him their first ever African Donaldson Fellow. The very next year, Columbia University also made him a John Jay Fellow. He also became a Henry Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute. Then here in Ghana, he was voted twice as one of the top 5 most respected CEOs. So you see, like the guy actually has the reputation. The guy has built for himself something solid, right? Now let's move to something very interesting. While Ken was busy building his business reputation, his own cousin, right, his father's sister, who married Edward Akufo-Addo and gave birth to Nana Akufo-Addo. So that makes Akufo-Addo the cousin of Ken Ofori-Atta. So while Ken was busy building his business reputation, his cousin Nana Akufo-Addo was also trying hard to become the president of Ghana. He ran as the main opposition candidate in 2008 and then again in 2012. During those times, Ken was quietly working behind the scenes to support him. He used all his connections with big companies and his rich clients to raise money for his cousin's political party, and that's the NPP. Okay, so by 2014, Ghana's economy had become very, very bad. So bad that we needed other countries to help us financially. And everyone was tired of the NDC. The NDC was in power at the time. Everybody was tired. So fed up. So when Akufo-Addo decided to run for president a third time, Ken saw the opportunity and he took over everything when it came to fundraising. This guy raised money from every corner to support his cousin because he knew that this time NDC will be out. At that time, it was Atta Mills who came into power, and unfortunately, he passed away. So John Dramani Mahama, who was the vice president, became the president, right? So when they ran the elections on the 7th of December 2016, Nana Akufo-Addo won the election by a very huge margin. He won in a landslide, hands down. So after he won, a month later, on January 10th, 2017, he was sworn in on January 7th, and on January 10th, the new president chose his supportive cousin, Ken Ofori-Atta, to be the finance minister for Ghana. For their family, this was a big deal because 45 years before, Ken's own father had been the deputy finance minister, and now his son is the finance minister himself. I'm telling you, in Ghana, there's only one family that controls everything, whether you like it or not. The Ofori-Atta family. That one man, Kwekudua, who decided to bore his shoe. This one I'm saying is for the Ghanaians. A boy his shoe over 100 children. His family controls everything in this country. I am very certain that when we get deep into this matter, things that will be revealed will be crazy. If you want to go into who actually controls Ghana, the kind of secrets that will be revealed. Yeah, let's forget that one for now. We will not go deep. Maybe one day. So when Ken Ofori-Atta took over the finance ministry, the president gave him a very special assignment. It wasn't just about managing the country's finances. The president wanted to completely change how Ghana handled money. Like the country was really struggling financially and we were relying on other countries for help shamefully. So Akufo-Addo wanted to change that. So he asked Ken to design the Ghana Beyond Aid plan so that we wouldn't have to always depend on foreign help. And back then, before Akufo-Addo became president, as I said, the economy was not looking good, right? Just 2 years before, in 2015, Ghana had to take a loan of $980 million. So 908, almost $1 billion from the IMF. This was because we were spending more money than we were making, and the economy just wasn't growing at all. Going for more loans would put a lot of pressure on the government, so Akufo-Addo wanted to avoid it at all costs. So on March 2nd, 2017, Ken presented his first national budget. In that budget, he took away 15 different taxes all at once. Like the audacity. The country is struggling, no? He took 15 different taxes away. This included taxes on banking services, even local flights. Can you imagine? So this actually surprised many people in the international markets, because if you claim not to go for more loans, these taxes should be your next source of income. You don't cut any off, you even add more, not to talk of taking 15 out. Well, good news is it worked, and Akufo-Addo was so impressed by it. So by May of that same year, he added Ken to his 19 cabinet ministers. This meant that Ken was now at the very top of decision making in the country. And within just about 18 months, the result of his hard work started to show clearly for everyone to see. If we will be honest, one popular international agency known as Standard & Poor's even changed Ghana's economic rating from below D to a B with a stable outlook. And this was a very big deal because it was the first time in 10 whole years that our country's rating had gone up like that. By 2018, the international community started celebrating Ken. The World Bank named him the Africa Finance Minister of the Year. Oh, Kenny. Even a magazine in London called The Banker gave him a similar award. They named him the Finance Minister of the Year. That same year, okay, during their annual spring meetings, they even made him the head of committee for both the World Bank and the IMF. What are you telling me? He also became the chairman for the African Caucus and the African Capacity Building Foundation. This put Ken right into the rooms where decisions about Africa were being made. When the big men are sitting down to discuss Africa, not Ghana, Africa, Ken was also sitting there. What are you telling me? I know most of you didn't know anything about this. How Ken actually put Ghana on the map. He was the right person to become the finance minister. There was nobody else in Ghana that was qualified. And when Akufo-Addo made him the finance minister, he did the right thing. I feel like it is not because he was his cousin or he is his cousin, that is why he made him the finance minister. No, but I feel like he was actually the most qualified person in the whole country to be the finance minister. Believe it or not. Meanwhile, back home in Accra, okay, while Ken was having all this power outside of Africa, back in Accra, his power in government was just growing and growing. You see, the finance ministry was in charge of the budget for every single government office. It was like a one-way street. If any other minister wanted money to run their department, they had to get Ken's approval first before the money could be released. If the Ministry of Roads want to do something, they need Ken's personal approval. If any kind of ministry, whoever you are, if Ken does not give you his personal approval, and as he gained more and more power, naturally, we started talking. People started talking. Is it Ken who is controlling the government, or is it the president? What is going on? But the president stood behind him, actually supported whatever that Ken was doing, because what he was doing was bringing results. So he was happy. In 2019, Akufo-Addo even spoke to the media, and he made it very clear that Ken is not in power because he is his cousin. He said he is in power because he is capable. And I actually believe that. Whether you believe it or not, I'm not here to argue with you on that. To make people trust Ken even more, Ken himself told the public that he wasn't taking any salary or all those travel allowance for his jobs. Ken was not taking any money for that. He was trying to show us that he was a true patriotic citizen. He was just there, like he was just there. He was serving his country. He wasn't taking a single dime. That is what he said, though. That is exactly what he said. He said he doesn't take salary, whatever the case may be. But then, things started to turn ugly in 2020. Ken brought up this new plan called the Agyapa Royalties deal. Okay, this is a full topic on its own. And if you've heard of this deal, you know it was the beginning of Ken's downfall. I'll make a full story on that. But to sum up everything, the main idea of this deal was to calculate the future money that Ghana would get from its available gold. Just listen, just listen. They wanted to calculate the future money that Ghana would get from its available gold that it has today. Then they'll take that money, they'll package it all together. Then they'll sell shares of it on the London Stock Exchange so that Ghana could get a lot of cash quickly. So we are actually selling our future gold today. So if gold, let's assume that gold is 1 cedi today, okay? If gold is 1 cedi today and we sell it today, we get the cash today. If tomorrow gold goes to 10 cedis, we don't have access to that 10 cedis because we have already sold it for 1 cedi. And that is what they wanted to do. So they thought this was going to be a very good deal. But then, my friend, there was a very big issue. A very big one. I'm not going deep into this, but like as I said, let me just summarize. Like the government went and hired Databank to advise them on this Agyapa deal. Databank. Now this Databank, we all know it was Ken Ofori-Atta's own company, though he resigned 4 years before becoming the finance minister. But still, he had some personal shares there. Ken had shares there. So Ken bringing up this Agyapa Royalties plan, he bringing this plan, and then he himself going to hire his own company to be the financial advisor. This was a terrible move because if there's any profit, it goes to Databank, and because Ken has shares in Databank, the money still comes back to him. Have you seen the plan? So it was a very terrible move. You can imagine people started complaining right away that this wasn't right. It was a conflict of interest. So Ghana had just created the office of the Special Prosecutor 3 years ago with the intention to fight corruption and to investigate such cases. Martin Amidu, who was the head of this office at the time, stepped in to investigate the whole thing. He wanted to see what was going on with this Agyapa Royalties deal. He did his work and he wrote a 64-page report. In that report, he said there was serious corruption and a lot of fraud in how the whole deal was put together. Then on November 16th, which was my birthday in 2020, something shocking happened. Martin Amidu just resigned all of a sudden. The guy says, I am not going to be the special prosecutor again. He wrote a letter saying that the government was trying to stop him from investigating the Agyapa case. They wanted to tell him what to do, and even that some people were threatening him to stop the investigation. This whole thing really made people wonder if this new anti-corruption office that the government themselves have created can actually do something against the government, if it can really do its work without fear. After Martin Amidu left, the government decided to put the Agyapa deal on hold. They said they would look at it again. Then some NPP supporters said that yes, this showed that our country's system were working because the government actually stood in to put the Agyapa royalty deal on hold. They said yes, Akufo-Addo is working. But many people, many critics didn't believe it, especially the NDC foot soldiers. They pointed out that even though the Agyapa deal was paused, Databank was still working on other deals for the government, buying and selling bonds and doing other kind of investments in the name of the government. So the line between Ken's government job and his private business was still very unclear. In fact, people had been complaining about this blurred line for a while, ever since the banking cleanup that happened between 2017 and 2019. You know, during the time where the central bank closed down or merged many local banks. I know you all heard that story. And this actually cost Ghana about 12 billion Ghana cedis. People were saying that Databank actually gained from all of this because their main competitors were removed from the market. The amount of money that the government needed to solve the problem was lesser than the amount of money that they used in collapsing those banks. So people started thinking that, okay, Ken Ofori-Atta is at it again. He wanted to collapse all his competitors so that Databank will be the only bank that can stand in, blah, 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 blah. Even though no official investigation ever proved this, people were talking about it everywhere. Ghanaians now. Then in March 2020, the whole world was hit by COVID-19, right? I want us to go back a bit to March 2020. That was when COVID-19 came. And once again, it was Ken Ofori-Atta who had to find all the emergency loans and borrow money to help our country survive, because there was no money. There was I don't know where the money has gone, but there was no money, so he had to mobilize some things and borrow money to help the country to survive. And while all this was going on, the government also gave an insurance contract for health workers to Enterprise Group. And again, people quickly started to raise concerns, because you remember when Ken retired from Databank, he actually went to Enterprise Group. Ken had business connections with Enterprise Group, and the government still gave Enterprise Group this contract. So what is going on? People felt it was another conflict of interest, but Ken's office quickly came out to say it wasn't true. They did everything, but who cares? We don't give a damn. Later in December 2020, President Akufo-Addo won the election for his second term. Yes, nana twaso. Around that same time, Ken Ofori-Atta himself had caught COVID-19. He had the virus. His health became very bad, so he actually had to travel all the way to the Mayo Clinic in America for treatment in February 2021. While he was away, some rumors started spreading on social media. They said, "Hey, Charlie, have you heard what has happened? Ken Ofori-Atta is dead, though. Ken Ofori-Atta, the guy is dead, though. COVID don't die, oh." Everybody was talking, everybody was saying it, and they said the government wanted to hide it from the people. They didn't want us to know that Ken is dead, and blah, blah, blah. TV stations, if you own your TV, then you see news stations. Instead of them to talk about what is going on in the country, they are all talking about Ken Ofori-Atta's death. Ken Ofori-Atta's ministry, the finance ministry, had to quickly release statements to calm people down and stop the panic. And thankfully, the supposed dead man finally came back home. Ken Ofori-Atta. Goodness me. Then in May 2021, the government traveled to Tamale to hold a town hall meeting. Okay, they wanted to talk to people about taxes and, the economy. When people started asking serious questions about how much money Ghana was owing, our finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, stood up and promised everyone that no matter what happened, Ghana would never and ever in our life go to the IMF for help. But that decision actually locked us out. It caused us a very big problem. It made it impossible for us to get financial support from other countries and some other international bodies who heard this bold claim. You say you don't need our help, you will see. So they decided that they will not give us loan again. They will not help us again ever in their life. Omo kantam. This really pushed Ghana into a very serious economic problem. Just think about it. Like by the middle of 2021, the money Ghana owed had increased to over 351 billion cedis. Remember that in 2015, we went for 981 million, almost 1 billion. But by the middle of 2021, the money we owe 351 billion cedis. And the edge in what 2015, was it dollars? Did I say it was dollars? Okay, maybe we will do some calculation. Yes, but this one is 351 billion cedis, right? That's more than 80% of everything our country produces in a year. 80% more than our GDP. We owe more than 80% of our GDP. How can we pay back? Because of this, the international groups that check if our countries can pay their debts, they started lowering Ghana's scores. Fitch did it in January, Moody's followed in February, and then Standard & Poor's, that had increased our rating to B, just decreased it back again. Banyang. This meant that we couldn't borrow money from the global financial markets anymore. Even with all these troubles, the finance ministry still kept borrowing money on the side. Like borrowing money on the side from countries who will give to them. They needed this money to keep important programs running, like the free SHS and then some other things. For example, about 7.6 billion cedis was spent on education alone during that time. And where will we get that money from if we no borrow? You see, the government just kept on borrowing heavily throughout 2021, continued straight into 2022. Then in early 2022, the war between Russia and Ukraine started. This war pushed up the prices of oil and food all over the world. And you see, I hear some people saying that how did Russia and Ukraine war affect us in our country? We were nothing concern Russia and Ukraine war. But the thing is, in Ghana, if only we produce our own materials, that would have been fine. But we don't. We import about 75% of almost everything we use, including fuel and even fertilizers for farming. So the rising global prices definitely hit us very hard. The things that we are importing have already been increasing in price on the global market in dollars, and we are now importing it into our country. So just imagine, the prices of everyday things in our market just jumped up all of a sudden. Inflation, which was around 13.9% in January 2022, moved all the way to over 54% in December. We definitely needed a lot of money to run the country at this point. And to find a solution, Ken presented a new budget. He wanted to bring in a kind of tax we call the E-Levy. This E-Levy, The plan was to charge 1.75% fee on mobile money transfers. We all know that. But only if the amount was more than 100 cedis. They wanted Parliament to approve it quickly. But the members of Parliament were completely divided on this E-Levy thing. In the end, they had to vote. And for the first time in our history, the vote was a tie. So they rejected the budget. It even ended in a terrible fight. I don't know if you guys remember, like some time ago, they said the parliamentarians were fighting. It was because of E-Levy. E-Levy. Let me explain why that happened. Ghana's 8th parliament, it wasn't like anything we had seen before. Usually, all the 275 MPs will come together to pick their seats in parliament. It's either NDC takes the most seats or the NPP takes the most seats, right? But this time around, the seats were just divided right in the middle. NPP had 137 seats. The NDC also had 137 seats. Then there was just one independent member, Joseph Osei-Owusu. He was also the acting deputy speaker. Okay, and because Joseph was the only independent MP, he usually supported the NPP in votes and in other decision-making matters. I don't know, maybe he just liked the NPP, or maybe he loved the ruling government, whatever it is. He decided to support the NPP. So that meant that the NPP could always count on 138 votes to pass their bills. If they wanted to vote, NDC will vote 137, NPP will vote 137. But because of that independent guy who always supports NPP, NPP now had a lead. Okay. But then, on the night when the parliament was going to vote on the E-Levy, the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, wasn't there that evening. So Joseph Osei-Owusu had to take charge of the meeting as the deputy speaker. This became a very big problem for the NPP. Why? Because of Article 104. It says that if you are presiding over the House, either as a speaker or a deputy speaker, you cannot vote. So because Joseph was in the speaker's seat, he couldn't cast his own vote, and this brought the government numbers down to 137. At the same time, the NDC also had 137 members present, and every single one of them voted against the E-Levy. They said, we don't want the E-Levy. So what happened? The House was completely tied. 137 votes for the NDC, 137 votes for the MPP who wanted the E-Levy. So Joseph sat down for a while and he decided to give the chair to the second deputy speaker. His idea was that he would be free from the position so that he can go down to the floor just like a regular MP and cast his vote for MPP. And that would have given NPP 138 votes, and then the E-Levy will pass, right? Brilliant idea, smart move. But the NDC members quickly saw what this guy was planning. He said, "Share for a year. All of a sudden, like, they rushed towards the speaker's platform. Then they started pushing the MPP members out of the way. And before we knew it, the whole chamber just turned into pure confusion, pure chaos. One MP will carry the other up in the air and landing on the ground says, "Sometime." Then another MP will say, "Let me show you why Roman Reigns is my favorite wrestler." He will go back. Then he will use speed, spear. 1-9. Then the members of parliament were wrestling, throwing punches right there in the house. And that's exactly how the fight started, though. And eventually, the MPs who didn't agree with the budget, they just walked out of the parliament to protest. If this is what is going to happen, then let's just walk out and go and protest. Then after that, the government had to bring the tax down to 1.5%, and then it finally got passed. So when this tax started, my brother, Ghanaians just hated it. People didn't like it at all. About 80% of the whole country was against it. To avoid paying this tax, people just stopped using mobile money. Some people quickly took out all their money from their mobile wallets, while others also started sending their money in small amounts, like 99 cedis every day, just to dodge the fee at 100 cedis. In fact, digital transactions died out completely. Everyone started using cash, and that was how bad it got. The government was also hoping to make like 7 billion cedis from this tax. But because people refused to use the service, they barely made anything. 2 months later, the government had to cut down their expectations by more than 90%. And they eventually took out the E-Levy. Right? So this whole situation made people feel like the finance minister didn't understand how ordinary Ghanaians were suffering at all. And as if that wasn't enough, the economy was getting worse and worse. Throughout 2022, our currency was just falling fast and lost more than half of its value against the US dollar. It started a year at 6 cedis to $1, something like that. But by November, it had crashed to over 15 cedis. It even got to 17 cedis at a point. The prices of basic things just doubled. People had truly had enough. We suffered. Staying in Ghana was hell at the time. So people started protesting everywhere. You see protests like Face the Country, which was the first protest that actually came. Avram Bemoshe and his people holding this protest. Various youths and adults who claimed to be free from party bias, they took to the streets to pressure the government to do something. But at the end of the day, nothing happened. In fact, the protest ended because some of those people who claimed to be party biased, they were bribed by the government to stop the protest. Funny people. Very funny people. Then in November, thousands of people joined in another protest called Kumipreku Reloaded. This one was led by lawyer Martin Kpebu. This protest looked interesting to me because the phrase Kumipreku was actually a famous protest from 1995 that Akufo-Addo himself had led back in the day against the government at that time. The organizers were actually using the president's own history against him. If you went to do Kumipreku against somebody, now it is your turn. You two are doing Kumipreku against you. Kumipreku Reloaded. Reloaded. Funny country. They all marched through the streets of Accra. They were shouting, they were demanding that the president, the vice president, and Ken Ofori-Atta all resign right away. Get out of this country. Get out of the seat. Now. Just a few months before this, the president told Ken Ofori-Atta to go to the IMF. just a few months before this protest. Akufo-Addo told Ken Ofori-Atta to go to the IMF and go and get some money, because what is going on in this country, if you don't go to IMF, something will happen. And this was a complete change from what Ofori-Atta had promised us, where he said he wouldn't go to IMF no matter what happened. But now the president is asking, hey, Massa, where your child want to go to IMF for? I don't want trouble. Because of that, his reputation was completely destroyed. Completely what? Destroyed. Even members of his own political party started turning against him. In October 2022, 8 members, no, is it 8? 80 members of parliament from the NPP held a press conference inside the parliament. They told President Akufo-Addo to remove Ken Ofori-Atta and also to remove his Minister of State, Charles Edu-Boahene. They even threatened that if Ken wasn't sacked, they would not support the government budget that was coming up. This was a serious threat, so the president had to quickly step in and do something about it. He went to meet some of these MPs who were giving Ken a hard time and begged them to let Ken present the budget first. Then he promised to review their request after that. Then around that same time, some other MPs also tried to vote Ken out of his finance minister position. But you see, on the surface, things weren't getting any better. In December 2022, the government sadly announced that they couldn't pay back their external debt. For the first time in our country's history, Ghana just couldn't pay its international debt anymore. To try and fix this problem, Ken brought in the domestic debt exchange program. Okay, this program was a terrible one. It was a very big mistake. The government had no other option than to start scamming their own citizens. Why do I say they were scamming us? My brother, my sister, my friend. You remember the president asked Ken to go for a loan from the IMF, right? Yes, the IMF gave the government a difficult condition. They said they wouldn't give any money unless Ghana reduced its total debt to a manageable level. So because of all this, the government brought in the domestic debt exchange program, which I said was a scam. And that this new plan, the government asked people who had old bonds to swap them for new ones. But these new bonds came with different conditions. They would pay much lower interest and people will have to wait much longer to get their principal back. The government wasn't cancelling the debt, no. They were just changing the rules of how they'll pay back the money, just to ease the pressure on them, kakra. For example, let's imagine that someone invested 100,000 cedis, right, and was expecting to get 18,000 cedis in interest every year, and then get all their 100,000 cedis back in 5 years. With the DDEP, the government could tell them that, no, now you only get 5,000 cedis a year, and you also have to wait much longer than 5 years to get your 100,000 cedis back. This meant that their investment was no longer as valuable as it was before. And to make matters worse, in the year 2023, the government said they wouldn't pay any interest on the money at all. So in 2023, nobody made anything on their bonds. As you can imagine, this made Ghanaians very angry. A lot of people, especially those pensioners who were using that interest money to take care of themselves, their medicine, and also pay for their rent. All businesses, churches, and even university students who had put their money into these bonds were all angry. So when those interest payments were cut or delayed, people suddenly couldn't pay their school fees anymore, or they couldn't keep their businesses running. People started protesting again. It was a sad sight, my friend. You see our grandmothers, our grandfathers sitting on the plastic chairs outside of the finance ministry week after week, just begging the government to give them their hard-earned money. Now, while all these were happening, Ken came out to defend the program. He said the government really had no other choice. If they didn't do the DDEP, Ghana might not have been able to pay any of its debt at all. In his mind, that would have put all the government salaries at risk, threatened public services, and even stopped the IMF from giving us the bailout. He believed that this tough decision was needed to stop the entire economy from collapsing. But, some people saw it differently, especially those who had their money in it. They weren't buying what Ken was saying. They felt like these ordinary people were just being made to suffer for the government's mistakes of borrowing too much for many years and not managing the country's finances well. So the MP started pushing the agenda again of voting Ken out. When it came time for the vote to remove him, 136 members of parliament said yes, throw him out. But Ken's own party members didn't want their names to be recorded as voting against him. They didn't want people to say that NPP people voted against Ken. So just before the vote started, all of them just stood up and walked out of the room. And because they walked out, the opposition party couldn't get the number of votes they needed. So the plan to remove him failed again. Ken also had to go and answer some questions in front of the special committee that was created for that. But the president kept defending his cousin. He said that if he sacked Ken, it would destroy the talks that they were having with IMF. We will not get the money. So he didn't take Ken out. Finally, in May 2023, the money that they were waiting for, the IMF officially agreed to give it to Ghana. They decided to give Ghana $3 billion. So they sent the first payment of $600 million. This was the 18th time Ghana had to go to the IMF for help. The same country that was always talking about Ghana beyond aid, we will not go to the IMF, we will not, was now completely depending on help from outside again. Now that the loan was approved, everyone expected the president to take Ken out. Fast forward to January 2024, there was a cabinet reshuffle. Right? The president sacked some of his cabinet members, including the Minister for Trade and Industry. Ken was obviously the next person. Everybody was expecting him to get out of there. But instead of letting Ken go, the president actually gave him more power by making him the acting Minister for Trade and Industry. The person that he has sacked, no. The president has gone to put Ken as an acting minister of that position. This made a lot of people angry. Like, it really looked like the president just didn't want to let his cousin go. But the pressure that was coming was too much for Akufo-Addo to handle. So 1 month later, he finally took Ken Ofori-Atta out, and he replaced him with Mohamed Amin Adam as the new finance minister. Ken had served for 7 years and 1 month. But Charlie, the story didn't just end though. 2 months before he left office, 3 people went to the office of the Special Prosecutor to complain about a contract the government had given to a company called Strategic Mobilisation Ghana Limited. Ken was still the finance minister when this contract happened, so the investigators quickly started looking into it. This looked like a very massive corruption case. This investigation took a long time, from December all the way to October 2025. At that time, Ken was out of office for more than a year, but the investigators still wanted to find out how the Finance Ministry and the Ghana Revenue Authority hired this particular company. The company was supposed to help monitor fuel and customs duties so that people wouldn't dodge taxes, right? What they found, my friend, was shocking. The ministry completely ignored Parliament. They just gave the contract directly to this company. They didn't even allow other companies to bid for it. They just took it and gave it to them, even though the money that was involved was way too much for a direct contract like that. In fact, the investigators calculated that because of this deal, our country lost over 1.4 billion cedis. Like, just look at how the money is just being mentioned. Everything billion, million. Yeah? 1.4 billion cedis. And you know what else they found? The company wasn't even doing any of the work. They were just going around and copying fuel data from another government agency, and then they would charge the state for every single liter of fuel that was transported. It is not their own AO. They will go and take information from another government agency, then they'll come and submit it to the government, to the Parliament, and they'll charge the Parliament for every single liter of fuel transported. Meanwhile, there was nothing going on. This whole deal started in 2017. 2017, the exact year Ken Ofori-Atta became the finance minister, till when they reported it, which was in 2024. Now, this same investigation also opened up 4 other financial fraud cases. First, they found out that $58 million had been paid for the National Cathedral, but the cathedral wasn't even finished. We don't know where the money went to. I won't go much into that. Then they saw a contract for Mercedes-Benz ambulances where the prices had been increased to $35 million when the actual price of the cars were way cheaper. And that wasn't all, my brother, my sister. the government also swallowed money that was supposed to be given back to the citizens as tax refunds. And some gold royalties were missing too. They even looked into Ken's company, Databank, and as we know, while Ken was the finance minister, his company was working as the advisor for the government loans that he himself was approving. So, summary, they were just making a lot of money from the country's debt. Whilst Ken Ofori-Atta was borrowing money, he was borrowing and then he was making profit from the money he was borrowing. Anytime they go for loans, a huge chunk will go to Databank and Ken would benefit from it. Now, let's leave all that aside, okay? In December 2024, President Akufo-Addo lost the election and Mahama came back as president, okay? As soon as the new government took over, they promised to make sure that the previous government answered for their actions. Then they brought this group called the Oral, and by this time, the country's debt had just gotten completely out of hand, right? Back in 2016, Ghana's debt was around 120 billion cedis. If you divide that by every Ghanaian, before Akufo-Addo became president, each person would owe about 4,000 cedis. Yeah. But just 8 years later, this debt had shot up to 742 billion cedis. So that means that after Akufo-Addo left power, you, as you are there listening to me right now, you, every single person in Ghana today, owes more than 24,000 Ghana cedis. The money way some people don't see before, but then they owe. Now, let's talk about Ken Ofori-Atta. Okay, on January 2nd, 2025, he left Ghana and traveled to the United States. He told everyone he was going for medical treatment, but just a few weeks after that, the Special Prosecutor sent him a very important letter. They told him he was a main suspect in 5 different criminal cases and that he needed to come back to Accra by February 10th to show up in court. But Ken didn't show up on that day. His lawyers came instead and brought a doctor's report. But guess what? The report didn't even have a name on it to show who it was for. Whether it was Ken's medical report or a fabricated one, no one knows. And because of that, the investigators refused to accept it. And they quickly declared him a wanted man. Mami no me so kakra. Why? Talkatives are suffering, no? Talkatives. That is suffer. It don't be easy. Where was I crying? Okay, so I was saying that Ken's lawyers brought this medical report and it didn't even have a name on it, so we didn't know who the report was for, whether it was for Ken, whether it was for whoever it is, we don't know. So the investigators refused to accept it, and they quickly declared him a wanted man. After some back and forth, his lawyers promised he would definitely return, and because of that, they removed his name from the wanted list. So a lot of Ghanaians were like, you people, you have put this man on a wanted list, then you have going to remove him again from the wanted list. Are we sure that this NDC, they can catch this NPP man? These NDC people, they and NPP are brothers. They cannot arrest anybody. It is just a camouflage. They want to do this, they want to do that. But there's a lot of things that are going on in the background. There are a lot of things that are going on in the background that we don't know. Okay, and so the reason why they took him off the wanted list was because his lawyers actually promised that he will come back to Ghana. Yeah, so they did that. And after they removed him, his family also came out to say that Ken was in America for prostate cancer treatment. Some say he was there for COVID-19 treatment. We don't know what is going on. Even the report didn't have his name on it. And then his family accused the investigators of not paying attention to Ken's health records. But the report that you brought, there was no name. So what should we do? Yeah? Because of that, the investigators there, they didn't care. They didn't care at all. They gave Ken Ofori-Atta another date for him to come for an interview, which was June 2nd. But Ken missed that one too. So on June 5th, they went ahead and got an INTERPOL Red Notice for him. And this meant that police all over the world will be looking for Ken until he is sent back to Ghana. The reason for the Red Notice was because he had used his government position to make money for himself. And that was the reason why they went for the Red Notice. Later that same year, President Mahama cancelled all government contracts with the private company that was involved in this whole issue. Then in November, the investigators finally took the case to the High Court in Accra. They filed a total of 78 charges. Ken Ofori-Atta alone had 28 charges against him. And the former communist... The former waiting. Former Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, this guy too was charged with 39 charges. And the owner of the private company involved in the fraud had 19 charges. Okay. Then, that same month, something interesting happened. Interpol decided that let's suspend the Red Notice. Yeah. It is not... No, let's just suspend it. They said that they needed to review the case because the Ghanaian investigators had been too quick to ask for the alerts without filing the official court charges first. They actually went for the Red Notice before they went to file the charges in court. So Interpol said, hey, you cannot come and look for wanted before you come and file charges. Meanwhile, you haven't charged the person, and you have already asked us to put the person on the wanted list. So they took him off quickly. And despite all of that, the Interpol taking him off the wanted list, the Ghana's Attorney General sent a formal letter to the US government asking them that, hey, send Ken Ofori-Atta back to Ghana. Send him back to Ghana. And at that time, Ken was still living in America, but his visa had actually expired. He came with a visitor visa. Okay, and he expired in November. So technically, he was staying there illegally. So in January 2026, some officers from ICE, they arrested him because of the expired visa, and they took him straight to the detention center. When they arrested him, some Ghanaians were like, yes, the Ghana government is working. They have arrested Ken Ofori-Atta. Put up. They didn't arrest him because of the Ghana issue. He was arrested because his visa had expired. Why? Why? Anyways, Ken didn't give Ghana a damn. He managed to pay his bail money and finally walked out of the detention center. Yeah. It turned out that his adult son was an American citizen, so the son quickly applied for his father to get a permanent stay in America. And under American law, this completely solved all his visa problems. Yeah. Then by June 15, 2026, America officially gave Ken his green card and closed the case to deport him. Immediately after that, his lawyers ran to the media shouting that Kenny. The American decision proved that the charges in Ghana were all fake. They were making noise that yes, American court has proved that Ghana, what we are doing against Ken is just skirmishes, is that propaganda and all of that. But the investigators didn't keep quiet. Yeah. They quickly reminded everyone that, hey, just because you go get green card in America don't mean say your criminal charges for Ghana are dropped or are disappeared though. They made it clear that even if you are now a citizen there, the police can still arrest you and send you back to Ghana to face trial. And my friend, that is the story of the almighty Ken Ofori-Atta, and the reason why he became the most wanted man in this country. If you have any other topics that you want me to cover, first give this video a like and then leave your suggestions in the comments. And if you love me so much, then subscribe to Mysteries with Nix and turn on notifications for new stories.